Hello, bookish friends. I'm back. This week I wanted to do something a little bit different. Since I never got around to doing like a haul video, just because I started the channel a little bit later than I was expecting. I had a bunch of books from Christmas and my birthday, which is in January, that I, would have done for a haul video, and I thought it would be kind of like a nice way to expose myself by going through the haul now, and basically saying whether or not I have read like the books that I got like for Christmas and my birthday. Just because, now it's like 2-3 months later since we're in like the middle to end of March. So here we go. To kind of preface this, there are 2 books that I don't have currently like on my shelves that were a part of like this grand list of books that I got as presents. And I guess like it probably makes sense to go through both of those first. They're both books that I've read, so at least there's that. I've gotten rid of them for like 2 different reasons, I guess. So the first one I read was A Spindle Splintered by Alex Haro. And for this book, I read it like back in January. It was just a novella, so pretty quick read. Also explains like why I did get through it, maybe. I actually like unhauled this. I sold it at like a used bookstore, just because while I enjoyed it, it was definitely not something that I would have like necessarily recommended to anyone else to read, just in like my personal circle. And there was like, I don't know, it didn't really feel like there wasn't a need for me to keep it. Like, space is limited, and I don't know, just having it wasn't bringing me joy. So there we go. But I had got that one at the Barnes & Noble gift sale. Sorry. So the books that I've gotten also include books that I bought myself at like the end of year Barnes & Noble sale, where, all of the hardcovers were half off. So the first book, A Spindle Splintered, is basically the story of like, it's like a fractured fairy tale, gender bending version of Sleeping Beauty, where it's an urban fantasy. So there's this girl who has like a terminal illness that she's been living with like a short expected lifespan. And she has always like idolized Sleeping Beauty just because the girl is like sick and then is able to overcome her sickness like by true love's kiss, and wakes up and is like perfectly fine, lives a normal life. For her 21st birthday, her friend throws her like a Sleeping Beauty party, and she like pricks her finger on the spindle of like an antique spinning wheel that her friend brought in, and is like transported into a fairy tale timeline, where there is like a Sleeping Beauty who's trying to escape like her own fate. Since she can't necessarily save her own self, she's decided that she takes it upon herself to help out this other Sleeping Beauty. So yeah, I mean, it was good, but just I didn't really feel the need to keep it, so that one is gone. The next book that I read that was part of my list was Cobble Hill. Something about Cobble Hill. Oh no, I don't remember. So the next one I read is called Cobble Hill, and it was by the same author who wrote the Gossip Girl series, which is why I picked it up. This one I got from the Barnes & Noble sale as well, hardcover, relatively new book. And it was a story, very much a story about nothing. Definitely falls under those guidelines, but it's just a bunch of people who live in Cobble Hill in New York City, like Brooklyn area. I feel like I don't really know how to describe this. But yeah, it's like a couple of like middle-aged people like with children. Then there's like a younger couple who's like in their 30s, and then an older couple who's like almost retired age. So, it talks about the relationships between like spouses, and then also there are like a few like child characters as well. It takes like a pessimistic tone, I would say. So it's definitely not like a quirky, like fun book. And it definitely has like more of like a sad, depressing tone. And I don't have them currently on my shelf because I did lend it to my friend to read. And she has not read it yet. So probably because of my not so glowing review, for being completely serious. Okay, the next one I have is a book that I did not get to yet. And it is 100 Years of Solitude. So This book I have heard like many people talk about as being like a great modern classic. And so that's kind of the main reason why I wanted to read this. It's been on my TBR for like quite a while. And it also won the Nobel Prize. So I feel like that's one of those things that would make me like want to take note and want to read it. I think it is a war story. And it tells the story of the rise, fall, birth, and death of the mythical town of Moncondo through the history of the Buendia family. Inventive, amusing, magnetic, sad, and alive, with unforgettable men and women, brimming with truth, compassion, and a lyrical magic that strikes the soul, this novel is a masterpiece in the art of fiction. I'm honestly like pretty excited to read this. I feel like not knowing anything about it, I think that it seems to strike a similar tone as like Ernest Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. That's just kind of like the vibe I'm getting from it, and I did love that book. So I'm hoping that it will live up to the hype, but I'm excited to read it. And this will probably make it into my TBR like pretty soon. Next, I have another classic, The Bell Jar. I haven't read any Sylvia Plath, so I am excited to pick this up. It is the story of like a woman's mental breakdown. And that's pretty much all that I know about it. But yeah, I'm excited to read this. Sylvia Plath like is also like a local author, just because I'm from Massachusetts, so I want to have a book of hers under my belt, so to speak. And this is obviously like one of her most famous ones. So really excited to get a copy of this and hope to read it also pretty soon. Next, I just finished this one like 2 days ago. The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. I bought this at the Barnes & Noble sale, and I had not read it. And as we know, I'm very picky about buying books that I've not read yet. But this one, I read The Binding last year by Bridget Collins and like loved it so much that I was willing to take a risk on this new book. That's for like an adult audience. I think that Bridget Collins originally wrote YA mostly, and The Binding was like her first adult book, and then this would be like her second adult book. It was so good. I have had very few like 5-star reads this year, and this book made it in as one of the 5 stars. It's very like dark academia. It involves like a school of like elite English aristocrat men, essentially, who are practicing the Grand Jeu, which essentially is like a classical education medium where, you know, like instead of doing exams, they create Grand Jeux, which are, you know, like a combination of like music, poetry, art to an extent. They create some kind of presentation or like critique on humanity, like using like themes of humanity. And the story itself follows this guy who was like a previous gold medal winner. So he like finished kind of like top of his class and went into politics. And at the beginning of the novel, he basically is getting kicked out of like the political party because he's not towing the line. And they send him like in exile as kind of like this is your only option if you want to save your face, to go back to the school and like study the Grand Jeu again. And the school is actually going through like this huge turmoil because for the first time ever, they have admitted 2 women to like the faculty. And so there's a lot of like tension because, you know, people are not necessarily like, I don't know, they're not necessarily on board with the decision. And these 2 faculty members like also did not go to the school. So it's kind of created like this like weird tension. And the story is basically like interspersed with like old journal entries from when he was at school. And so you kind of like the tales of like his controversial time at the school, like when he was a kid, kind of like unfold at the same time that the story is progressing. And it was just like so like masterfully done. It's like very tragic and like really deep. And it's just like, if you love like stories about boarding schools, like with, you know, like people who pretend to be like pretentious and, you know, that kind of vibe, like you should read this book because it was like just very, very well done. All right, so we're up to 3 that I've completed. Okay, next, let's do one that I haven't, I guess. All right, next I got The Princess Bride, and this was actually a gift from my sister. She, I think, has read like some of this book, but has not finished it. And I do love this movie. I'm not like one of those people who's like completely obsessed with it or anything, but I have seen it a few times. And it is kind of like something that I think about as being just like a great movie from my childhood. One thing I will say about this book, she did give me this like very nice edition that is illustrated. So it's got like nice pictures, but this book is so heavy. I think that she told me the pages, it has like those clay pages or something. So they literally weigh like so much. So even though the book is like, you know, a modest size, it literally just weighs like more than my books that are like 800 pages. So basically the Princess Bride is like a framed story. It's told, there's an outside frame of a grandfather coming to come hang out with his grandson who's like staying home sick for the day. You know, like there is a princess who falls in love with who she thinks is like a stable boy. And he eventually like goes away. She thinks like all love is lost. 'Cause like, you know, she was like in love with him, but I don't know, he didn't think he was like good enough for her, and she didn't like treat him well necessarily. And so then he goes away, kind of gaspy, like, if you're being honest. He goes away, he comes back, and he's like, you know, suave and fancy. And they reconnect, and then they go on like this big adventure. I guess I just told you the story of the movie, so I assume that that is a similar story to what is in here. But I've also heard that the tone of this book is like wildly different from the tone like in the movie. So I'm interested to see like what the difference is between the two of them. Okay. Oh God, another heavy book. The new Outlander book. I got this for Christmas as like a present. And yes, I have read this book. I talked about it recently in like one of my reading wrap-ups. I very much enjoyed this. This was another one of my 5-star reads for this year, limited number. But basically, this is the 9th Outlander book, and it did not disappoint, honestly. So we'll just leave it at that. And if you are interested in hearing more, I will link the wrap-up down below. Okay. Another one I read, Una Out of Order. Wow, I feel like these books like make it look like I have been reading a lot. This current order as it's been going. Okay, so Una Out of Order. I got this book as a present. It was like one of those blind date with a book type situations that my friend picked up because we had both read In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. And the cover of this blind date book said that if you had liked In 5 Years, you might like this book. That being said, I loved In 5 Years and would recommend it to like almost everyone just because it was like one of my top books from like 2020 when I read it. And yeah, I just loved it. I thought it was like fantastic, like masterfully done. A great interplay between like, you know, like love stories, friendship stories, a great application of like a time hop, like fantasy element to an otherwise like normal story. I would say coming from that frame, this one fell a little bit short, even though I did like the book and I thought the concept was cool. It was just like comparing it like to In 5 Years, like off the bat was like a little, you know, it was a hard comparison, honestly. And it's not the author's fault in any way. So yes, this book basically is about this character, Una. At the beginning of the book, she's like a teenager in the late 80s, I think. And she is having like a New Year's party with her boyfriend and like a bunch of her bandmates because she's like a keyboardist. And she's like contemplating a few life changes, doesn't know like which direction she's going to go. If she wants to like follow the band or like go on this like international trip with her friend. So she doesn't want to make the decision. So for New Year's, she wishes that she doesn't have to make the decision, essentially. And that basically kicks off her living a bunch of years like out of order. So at the beginning of, like at like New Year's, which is also her birthday, when like the clock strikes midnight, she is like transported to another year, and she does not remember like anything that has transpired from like the time hop itself. So all she remembers is like her New Year's party, and she has to live that year like out. And then like at the end of that year, she'll jump to another year, and it could be in the future, it could be like in the past, and there's no like rhyme or reason to the order that she's like living each of the years. Oh, I guess it's 1982, so it's the early 80s, not the late 80s. Sorry about that. There is also like there's a lot of like music woven in through this, just because she herself like is a musician. So music is like a recurring theme throughout the book, because they're definitely like a little bit more alternative. So that being said, like I feel like that aspect of the book didn't land as well for me as it might to someone who's like more into music. This was a fun read. It was interesting. It had some important viewpoints, I think, or like some unique perspectives that like time travel brought, or like, like the way that she was living her life. There was a lot of impact on like her relationships, both romantically and then like familially as well. Not necessarily like applicable to, your average person, since like time travel is not a thing. But still cool nonetheless in order to like tell the story. I would say my one like bone to pick with this, although I did enjoy it, was that it seemed like there was like a lot of plot holes in this book. Like one of the main things that like really bugged me was that like Una herself like was very rich, and they told you that it was because she had gone to school for like finance, and because of all the time hopping, she chose to just like know the market and do a bunch of research, and then like therefore invest in like the right things, like knowing the outcome, to, like essentially do invest like insider trading. Not really sure like how that happens, because in the beginning of the book she's only like 19 or like maybe 20. Like she's like really young. And so yeah, she will turn 19. So it's like, if she went to school like for investing, I feel like I don't understand how she would have gained the knowledge in order to like do this. It's like she was barely in college when this started. She had done 1 year of college, and then you're expecting me to believe that instead of like doing her like gen eds or something, all of a sudden she becomes like a prime investor. And is able to get away with insider trading. It's not the main point of the book, but it's something that I've realized with like magical realism books that I read, which I do really like magical realism, but at the same time, sometimes it makes it really hard for me to like turn off like that part of my brain that's like the fantasy reader and like trying to figure out how everything works. I'm just like not always able to accept things like just being told that that's how they are. So I guess it's more of a my thing than like a book thing. So I got The Secret Sisterhood, which is a nonfiction book from my friend who reads like mostly nonfiction. And so she sent me this book that is about all of the literary friendships of Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, and Virginia Woolf. So the people that each of them were like pen pals with and talked to their writing about. And it basically pulls together a bunch of like letters, diaries, and like unpublished communication between like these famous authors and the people that they were kind of like bouncing their stories off of. I love books about authors and books about like female authors. I've read a ton of books about like famous authors and their wives or like something like that. I have not read this. So next I have The Immortalists, and this book it's another magical realism type book, and I think it's about like a family of 4, and like there are 4 kids who go to like a psychic, and she tells them, or she can tell them their futures, essentially. Claims to be able to tell anyone the day that they will die. I think it follows their life like afterwards. So I'm excited to read this. I would say I've heard like mixed reviews. I think it's like one of those books that like was very popular, and so a ton of people read it, but I'm not sure like how much everyone liked it when they read it. But yeah, I have not read this one. Okay. Next, I have Envelope Poems by Emily Dickinson. This one I have read, and it is a poetry collection of fragments of poems that Emily Dickinson wrote on like little scraps of paper, just because paper was at a premium at the time. And basically the book is it was a smaller excerpt of like a larger project. And so it's more of like a gift type book. But I really liked reading this, honestly. It's not like, it's not as polished as like any of her other work, because they are just very much like fragments and stuff, but it is really cool to see like a deconstructed look at like her poems. Oh. She's coming to say hi. All right. So yes, I have read this one. Okay. Next I have Seasonal Work. Okay, so this is by Laura Lippman. And this is a short story collection that I saw like on Goodreads, and I had it on my list to read already. And then when I went to the Barnes & Noble sale, see, this one was, because it's a hardcover, it was on sale. And so I decided to pick it up. But basically, Laura Lippman is normally like a thriller writer. And I don't really read a lot of thrillers. So it's not something that like I'm super, super into in terms of like genres. However, this is like a bunch of like teeny tiny little thrillers, like little stories. And so I thought it would be like a great way, kind of get like a little sample of her work. I thought it would be like a great way to see if I liked her as a writer and if I would be interested in reading some of like her longer work. Next, I have Conversations with Friends. I definitely like just reviewed this also in like my wrap up, because I have read this one and I did enjoy it. I got this as a present from my friend for my birthday. She had already read it. And so she just sent it to me afterwards. Because we had both been talking about how we wanted to like read more Sally Rooney after having read Beautiful World, Where Are You, and like really liking it. This one I liked, honestly. I feel like I liked it. I liked it a lot, although not as much as Beautiful World, Where Are You, but also like so much more than I was expecting to. Basically, this one is the story of like a couple of girls who had like a history of dating, although they are not anymore. They basically get connected with an older millennial couple. And so like they're in their 20s, and the older couple is, like in their like their mid 30s, mid to late 30s, I guess, and having like a little bit of a marital struggle. And so they basically waltz in and being like young ingenues, if you will. She starts having an affair with like the husband. So it's like, a ton about like perceptions and like interpersonal relationships and like why characters do what they do, like deconstruction. And yeah, I really liked it. So it was good. I've actually lent it to another friend like since the time that I've read it. Okay. Next I have Joan Didion's Let Me Tell You What I Mean, which is a collection of essays. I actually haven't read anything by her, and this is a book that I got from the Barnes & Noble sale. So I'm excited to read it, and yeah, I'm excited to have read something by her, and hope to get this on the list soon. Next, I have My Body, which I feel like this is another like pretty viral-ish book. But I read her essay for like Medium like a while ago when it came out. I think it was probably in like 2020 when she like published it first. And I really liked her writing. I was pleasantly surprised by like how strong it was, and like how her message, like it seemed like very interesting. And the article itself was like talking a lot about how like as a model, your body like becomes like not your own necessarily, and the photographers themselves like think of you as like an object that they are photographing, as opposed to, you know, like your own like agency. And then like where the breakdown is in terms of like what she owns as like her, you know, like as a person over her own body versus like what is considered art and is therefore like not her property. There was a little bit about social media as well. I don't know, it was just like very interesting. And so since she made like a full length essay collection, I decided that I wanted to read it. So I got this, and it will be on my list soon. Last, I have a book that I did read, yay. Closing it off strong. I got Bridget Kemmerer's Defy the Night from the Barnes & Noble sale. And I bought this because I really enjoyed A Curse So Dark and Lonely and the rest of the Cursebreaker series. So I figured I would just go out on a whim and like buy Bridget Kemmerer's like new release book, which is like a Robin Hood retelling set in a fantasy land where they are having basically a pandemic. And there's a lot of like political intrigue that's going on over who has access to like the known cure. I read it, I liked it, and I think it was one of those situations where since I loved the Cursebreaker series so much, this one did not resonate as well for me. And I think it was very different. And I feel like I was expecting a little bit more of the same. It was more political, which I feel like it wasn't necessarily as strong. And I found the pacing of this book to be like a little bizarre as well. So like there was parts where it was like kind of slow, and then like the parts where like the politics were coming through like seemed a little fast and I don't know, hard to follow, but also like pretty basic. I do love her as an author. And I feel like it makes me even more excited for like her next book, like Forging Silver into Stars, which is just like a spin-off series with like a minor character from the Cursebreaker trilogy. And so since I'm realizing that maybe it's just like the characters of her writing that I love the most, I'm excited to continue in the same world, if it will. Just to like tally it up at the end now that I've reached my final book. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 2 books I don't have that I have read out of the list of like, I think it was 16, I want to say, total books. So I finished half of them. That's actually not so bad. Wow, good for me. So these are the books that I have read. I'm like really bad at mirroring. Yep. Yay, I completed so many. I'm gonna go celebrate and like buy more books maybe. What do you say? Is it time for dinner? Probably. Okay, we'll see you all later.